Because if they're true Louis Vuittons, they would be more than that for just one. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, sir. I'm not 100% familiar with the going price for a Louis Vuitton bag. My wife might be better at that. You know, in the environment we see today, the average declared value of a shipment is $50.
I did run a little over.
Well, I know you did, but I'm not going to follow your abuse of the process.
Ouch!
I think about a recent case we did involving the chemical lining on the inside of beverage containers, known as BPA-free, and that was a trade secret that was stolen.
We brought the four major platforms together, Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, and Walmart, to create an e-commerce task force. That's a great question, sir.
How many of them are toys?
The Super Bowl every year is a major, major event for both human trafficking and obviously intellectual property theft.
Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We welcome everyone here today to a hearing on intellectual property enforcement activities by the executive branch. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. The purpose of today's hearing is to scrutinize the Biden administration's enforcement of existing intellectual property laws. Any comments made today about the current administration's enforcement does not imply that previous administrations were somehow flawless. And I want to make it clear, this is a snapshot in time, but it's an important snapshot in time. Mr. Lord, from your experience, you gave us nearly $3 billion of seizures, 23 million seizures, some of which were in the de minimis, but most, I assume, were in larger shipments. Is that correct?
No, sir. Actually, the 90% of our intellectual property rights seizures did occur in the de minimis environment.
So the de minimis environment, the $800, or at least alleged to be $800 in value, because if they're true Louis Vuittons, they would be more than that for just one. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, sir. I'm not 100% familiar with the going price for a Louis Vuitton bag. My wife might be better at that, but yes, if the bag as a genuine article is in fact valued at more than $800, it would not be eligible for.
So when these come in at $800, sometimes they actually are more than $800 selling price, but that's what they claim. And the reality is this is a backdoor and abusive system that particularly China has figured out and is gaming to the tune of 1 billion parcels a year.
Well, Chairman, I would just start by saying that, you know, in the environment we see today, the average declared value of a shipment is $50. The vast majority of shipments are declared well under $100. So while we see shipments that are declared higher dollar value, and there certainly are instances of legitimate shipments being valued over, being well valued over 800, but being declared under 800, the vast majority of what we see from a value perspective is in fact much, much less than $800.
So in order to fix this, we have to deal not at going from 800 to 400 or 200. We have to deal with the fact that a $50 or $100 declared value is in fact very, very often, and I'll use that fake Louis Vuitton as an example, but it could be a fake Rolex, it could be any number, it could be, as the ranking member said, counterfeit cosmetics that literally can burn your face. It could be any of that.
That's correct.
Mr. Ball, you've testified that HSI's Innovation Lab is using AI to enhance staff capabilities. Can you walk us through how AI is helping staff currently and how you see the technology being used in the future to expand your agency's reach?
Yes, sir, it's a great question. So the Innovation Lab within HSI is relatively unique in federal law enforcement. It's an entity in our cyber and operational technology division dedicated to out-of-the-box thinking using advanced technology to further criminal investigations. When I started working criminal investigations, I'm dating myself a bit here, when we would plan for a search warrant, you'd have to take into account renting a truck and getting hand trucks and boxes, moving file cabinets and boxes of paper to go through. Today, that's not the case. You're dealing with terabytes and petabytes of data that are collected on search warrant or through other court processes that we have to sift through. The Innovation Lab is currently using AI technology to help criminal investigations sift through those court processes to identify items of evidence, things that we're looking for that are in that search warrant, to take criminal investigations with the goal of taking those criminal investigations down from that aspect of it, from weeks, months, and numbers of people, now down to much shorter. So we're very proud of that effort that we're using at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just about run out of time, so I'll yield.
Oh, I did run a little over.
Well, I know you did, but I'm not going to follow your abuse of the process.
Ouch. I thank the gentleman for part of that.
Mr. Goldfoot, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, DOJ filed only 6 new trade secret theft cases in 2022, as compared with over 91 cases filed between 2017 and 2021. What are your thoughts on why that happened? Why such a reduction?
Thank you for the question. So I think when I look at trade secret case statistics, I'm a little less concerned about fluctuations from year to year. I focus more on the impact of what we are doing and how we're using our resources to best serve the American people. What I mean by that is trade secret cases are truly some of the most complex cases that I've seen worked on in the sections I supervise. These are cases that, in addition to the difficulties that come with being a white-collar case, typically also require the investigators and the prosecutors to become deeply familiar with the technology at issue. And sometimes that means mastery over not just the technology, but an entire industry that you've never heard of or worked on before. I think about a recent case we did involving the chemical lining on the inside of beverage containers, known as BPA-free, and that was a trade secret that was stolen. The work involved in identifying that and preparing a case like that, not to mention the different proof issues involved with the trade secret statute, such as establishing all the aspects of a trade secret are maintained, the amount of preparation can be intense. Now, I think where you and I agree is the number is lower than it ought to be. I wish that we could be doing more of these cases. We're doing what we can with the resources that have been provided.
Mr. Ball, last year HSI opened 81 criminal investigations through its e-commerce program, iOS. These operations included 94 seizures with an estimated value of over $300,000. How does HSI and the IPR Center work with e-commerce platforms to prevent the intrusion of counterfeit goods into the stream of commerce?
That's a great question, sir. We found early on in the flow of e-commerce, especially in the increase of de minimis, that we were running into an issue. One of the things that we do at the National Intellectual Property Rights Center is coordinate very well with industry. The major e-commerce platforms were encountering counterfeits, were encountering bad actors, but weren't talking to each other. Worried about trade secrets, worried about bad publicity, worried about things shifting from one to the other. We brought the 4 major platforms together, Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, and Walmart, to create an e-commerce task force. This e-commerce working group, we were able to use some great common practices and some best practices that we had used with the automotive industry, with the airbag issue, where they created an industry group called A2C2 that's extremely effective, and bring that to bear on the e-commerce platform. So to date, they have agreed for a joint counsel. They have agreed to a third-party data contract where they can share that information with each other. And then that information also flows to HSI for criminal investigations as well.
Ray said, accusing China of stealing more personal and corporate data than any other nation by orders of magnitude. Mr. Lord, so assuming that Mr. Ray is correct, I assume he is, how have you focused on China? Or you can share that, I hate to blame you, but how has your organization, in following what Mr. Ray said, responded?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. I'm not familiar with the specific meeting that you referenced, sir. I'll be happy to look into it and have my staff look into it. But what I can say as a general matter is a lot of what you described there often requires export of sensitive technologies from the United States. So Customs and Border Protection works very closely with Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security, which is tasked with enforcing export of sensitive technology. Through that partnership, we do make interdictions at export when we get the correct information from the Bureau of Industry.
Okay, I'm asking, are you focusing on China? That's my question. And if so, are you prioritizing China? That's my question.
Okay, I apologize, sir. Yeah, so we're responsible at import for managing all threats. And in the context of IPR, well over 90% of counterfeit goods come from China and Hong Kong. They're consistently named on the USTR Special 301 report as a source for counterfeits. We are absolutely concerned about that threat, and it's something we think about every day.
In 2020, Congress passed the Protecting Lawful Streaming Act to close a loophole in the law that allowed sophisticated criminal enterprises operating streaming websites to traffic illegally copyrighted material. It's important, given that the American motion picture and television industries contribute 2.4 million jobs across the United States. And in 2022 alone, there were over 215 billion visits to pirate sites, many which look much more sophisticated than they did even a few years ago. Piracy of filmed entertainment cost the U.S. economy $29.2 billion annually. Now that Congress has closed that loophole in the law, I'm interested in how this authority has been used. Has DOJ pursued any actions using this new tool?
Thank you for the question. So, in fact, last week, the District of South Carolina, in a press release, announced what we believe to be the first concluded case for the Protecting Lawful Streaming Act. The defendant's name was Franklin Valverde, and that press release came out on May 2nd.
So could you expand on that as to how intellectual property theft by the CCP is harming the United States' global competitiveness and its competitiveness vis-a-vis China?
And thank you for that question. So, and as my colleagues in the National Security Division of the Justice Department and their Assistant Attorney General, Matt Olson, have said, it's an enormous concern that China is attempting to gain a competitive advantage over the United States by cutting corners and taking our technology rather than developing its own. As you say, sir, one of the issues we protect intellectual property at all is in order to encourage people to develop it, to give a sort of property right over it so that we're encouraging investment and everything else. There's damage whenever that's lost, yes, but it's doubly damage when that is a loss that then benefits one of our chief adversaries in technology and science. So I can tell you this is an issue that I see come across my desk repeatedly as we discuss these issues with our National Security Division colleagues. They're quite cited to this as well. The problem that is being created by a foreign nation state benefiting from U.S. technology improperly by acquiring it either through theft or through acquisition.
How many of them are toys? Because I always worry the Consumer Product Safety Group, tests toys to make sure that children are not harmed by them, but they don't do that, of course, with the counterfeits. Can you enlighten us on that point, any of you?
I assume that question was to me, Congresswoman?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. We do, in fact, encounter counterfeit toys. We do, in fact, encounter substandard toys. We encounter children's bike helmets that don't survive a basic drop test onto a concrete floor and then shatter when they hit the floor. We're fortunate enough, though, to have at many of our ports of entry a Consumer Product Safety Commission inspector to help us make sure that we are seizing the appropriate goods. I do not have a specific breakout here for you today for toys. I'll just say that last fiscal year, we did seize just over 230,000 game consoles and accessories. And from that, I would imagine there's a portion of toys in there. Toys is a big focus of what we do. We focus on that a little bit more from the import safety aspect.
Right.
Because there's other aspects that maybe they're not counterfeit, but maybe there's too much lead in the toy. So there's just a little bit of a different lens there. I'd be more than happy to have my team follow up with your
Sure,
staff.
whatever, I mean, I don't want to put a lot of extra work on you. I'd rather you spent the time enforcing, but whatever data you have, I would appreciate.
So let's talk about the China Initiative, because when the China Initiative was dropped in February of 2022, we saw a decline in actual cases prosecuted after that time. Isn't that true?
Thank you for the question. So when Assistant Attorney General Olson announced an end to the China Initiative, in the same speech, she announced the beginning of a new strategy to counter nation-state threats.
So on that new strategy then, because the numbers I looked at said that in fiscal year 22, that same time that this program got canceled, this Chinese initiative, we actually prosecuted 0 of the trade secret misappropriation cases or 0 of the economic espionage cases. Is that accurate?
So I do not have that statistic at my fingertips, but it would coincide with what I think to be true, that the number went down for that year. I don't believe that was because of the cancellation of the China Initiative. As I said before, fluctuations from year to year in the number.
If we're gonna, even if we change the name or change initiatives, would you agree that we ought to be ramping up our efforts to push back against Chinese intellectual property theft, or should we be reducing our enforcement efforts?
Well, thank you for that question, because I think all of us agree that we ought to be increasing our amount of intellectual property.
Absolutely agree with that.
What sorts of resources do you need to ramp up the prosecution efforts?
Thank you for the question. So being a career official in the Department of Justice, it's not my place to make, for example, a budget request or anything independent of what the administration is, or what they're asking for. What I can tell you as far as the work we're supervising and what we're seeing, we use the resources we have in order to recruit and train prosecutors who can then work with investigators in the field to appropriately build cases. Intellectual property cases are hard. They're hard because of the statutes involved and the elements you need to prove. They're hard also increasingly because of the international aspect of them. I think that probably is one of the biggest changes we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years. We're no longer in the world of 2012 when you could do something like the mega upload takedown by just finding their servers in the United States and seizing them and knocking out one of the biggest infringers at the time. What you have now is the criminals are adapting to tactics like that. They're attempting to locate their businesses themselves and their servers in jurisdictions where they calculate, or sometimes incorrectly, that the United States cannot get law enforcement cooperation. So increasingly, the resource and tool we need isn't just within the Department of Justice. We rely on the nation's international relations.
Let me get you to focus on what is internal. I mean, do you need more investigators? Do you need more prosecutors? I mean, what do you need? What is it that we can do to help you ramp up those efforts? And I'm not asking you to, to sort of speak for the White House or anything along those lines on specific budgetary requests, but I do want to get a sense of what exactly we're talking about from, the standpoint of if you need additional resources, what are they?
Well, thank you for the question. I can just repeat that, with more input, you get more output. And I think we are looking, I think it's a mixture of everything that you have described here.
Would you elaborate on how HSI's partnership with the National Football League and the Motion Picture Association work and what outcomes these partnerships have created?
Yes, ma'am. Fantastic question. Our partnerships across the spectrum of intellectual property benefit both business and our criminal investigations. One of those keys is the NFL. The Super Bowl every year is a major, major event for both human trafficking and obviously intellectual property theft. We work hand in hand with the NFL and with the brands and the apparel manufacturers, and we conduct operations around large events. The sports manufacturers provide subject matter experts with teams of HSI agents in the field taking these goods, and then as a key partnership in the National IPR Center and to these events is our CBP partnership. Identifying where these routes, the ports, intelligence of where things are coming from, for seizures of everything from counterfeit rings to jerseys to all kinds of sports apparel. We have that same kind of relationship with the Motion Picture Association as well. I have found that industry, when they own what is happening to their products and they share that information from us, it helps direct our criminal investigations much more effectively. And when they take what has been called before onesie-twosie seizures and they help put those together with what's happening not only to their brand, but then we can take that and attach it to what's other brands going after networks versus just individual shippers.
Mr. Lord, how do we close these loopholes? What policy recommendations would be helpful to you in closing these loopholes?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Congressman. I want to acknowledge first that Customs and Border Protection is very much aware of the challenges that the textile industry is facing in this moment. We've been working closely with the domestic textile producers in the United States since, we'll say, September or October of last year. I've had the privilege of going down to some of the production facilities in South Carolina that you've mentioned during my career. It's an impressive operation. And I don't wake up every day, my staff does not wake up every day not thinking about how to protect U.S. jobs. When it comes to the specific challenges in de minimis, we are ramping up our inspections of textile products in the de minimis environment. As an agency, we've made investments at some of our laboratory and scientific services centers around the country in Savannah, New York, and Los Angeles. They will have very cutting-edge technology to begin testing textiles for compliance with the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act. We do intend and are deploying that technology in the de minimis environment. There's a perception that we're not testing for that in the de minimis environment. That is not true.
Mr. Lord, let me ask you something real quick, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I've got 2 minutes, so I just want to kind of vet this thing through a little bit. Do you think that maybe labeling China as a country of concern would be a prudent step for us to take in Congress? Because we know that most of these issues are coming from the PRC, at least they're a big actor in this, but would that be helpful to you in your efforts to do your job?
That is an excellent question, sir. It's difficult for me to answer without understanding what that label might trigger for in terms of additional legal authorities or presumption of guilt or anything along those lines. At Customs, we're focused on the China threat, sir. More than happy to explore those ideas with you and your staff. We're committed to finding workable solutions in the de minimis space.
Can you speak to the challenges of working with international law enforcement on prosecuting streaming piracy cases and with Vietnamese law enforcement specifically regarding F movies?
Thank you. I assume the question is directed to me, sir.
Yes.
So thank you for the question. So, of course, longstanding policy prevents me from commenting about or confirming or denying the existence of any particular investigation. I think, however, your question is quite astute in pointing out the difficulties that we have in going after streaming sites or foreign defendants when they're located in jurisdictions where you're having challenges dealing with them. I think that increasingly we see this as an issue not solely for the Department of Justice, but administration-wide, looking also as part of a foreign policy and other ways to address the problem.
Mr. Ball, Mr. Lord, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I will say, sir, that yes, our relationship with the MPA and this case and many other cases, the problem that we face, as mentioned earlier, is shifting the jurisdictions, shifting the sites, having the trained investigators to work those cases. So we've partnered with the MPA and with the RIAA and with one of our key partners, the National Cyber Forensic Training Alliance in Pittsburgh, to create a digital piracy training program. both for the investigators and for inspectors and for attorneys as well. We do face the same international challenges from an investigative standpoint. HSI has HSI offices in those countries working with their law enforcement, but we share the concern and the frustration from DOJ as well.
Without objection, this hearing is concluded. Oh, I'm sorry. No.